Yeah. After. No. Erick Fuller. Born and raised Orange County boy. Recently moved to LA now where we're sitting in my new studio. So we decided to got a garage and build this beautiful palace to music.
How did you get into music originally?
You know what? It's from the time I think growing up listening to music as all of our parents did. Well, maybe some of them didn't. Mine did. But they weren't big into music. They weren't like, you know who this drummer was, the guitarist. They listened to the Beach Boys, Rolling Stones, whatever was on the radio. And I really didn't start getting into music probably till I was in high school. You would hear like a well-polished, produced song. And that's when I started going, ooh, I like that. And I still to this day, there's records and songs that are out that people are like, you like that? I'm like, I like the way it sounds. And there's also music like Link Ray. You know, one of my favorite songs, Black River Swamp.
Turning off the main highway, going down that country road.
Sonically, some people would say it's dark and muddy, but that conveys an emotion. So I'm constantly trying to like balance between a polished product and a song that has emotion, which is easier said than done.
Yeah. Are you a drummer first before you're an engineer, or how does that
By fault. I hear it, it's in my blood. I started playing when I was a kid, and the whole idea of bridging the gap from drummer to engineer was, I was always told if you can record a drum set, right, if you can get a good drum sound, everything else will come naturally. It's a hard thing to get right. And people still talk about, you know, the Bonham sound, the Beatles, all these different drum sounds, you know, Daft Punk, when you got electronic, so many different avenues, but I'll always be a musician first, right? And that's kind of how I think it helps a lot with approaching a recording session, of understanding how that thing moves, how it sounds when you hit it a certain way. They're calfskin heads. They're old school heads that this guy in Australia makes that they're kangaroo hide.
Oh, wow.
And because you can't do calfskin heads anymore because it's frowned upon, you know. That guy, you push, that guy's fucking crazy. See that full sound of the kit, the bass.
Why don't we talk about maybe some of the artists that you've worked with?
Primarily, I worked with an artist called Robert Francis. It's my buddy who I've opened the studio with. He's kept me busy, and I met him probably 5 years ago. I worked with the band Fume K, and they're the first band I ever recorded, and it was great. It's my buddy Will Niswanger. I worked with Josh Freeze. I've worked with Billy Howardell. I worked with Scott Klopenstein from Real Big Fish, Marty Stewart, Ry Cooter, Joaquin Cooter, his son of a bitch on drums.
And do they know you're a drummer too?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't always bring that up right away. I think I'm a big believer in like letting people discover things about you. It's more interesting when it's like reading a book, right? You don't want to know the ending. So I kind of like letting people get to the end before they go, organic. But I'm not ashamed to self-promote my studio and the engineering when it needs to be, because this is where I live. This is where I put in all my time and effort, and I think this is like my main focus right now. Studio and recording for sure.
This is a brand new studio.
Yeah.
You guys been working on it?
Couple months.
Okay.
He was working on it by himself, and I was like, yeah, do this, do that. You know, we'd be texting and calling, and it's like, yeah, do you definitely want to put in these banisters? But halfway through it, we go, well, why don't we, do it together? I have a bunch of equipment. He has a bunch of equipment, and it just made sense. And this was a garage/storage stable thing, and we pretty much gutted the whole thing out. And when that happened, we started talking more about details of how we wanted it to sound and feel. And a lot of studios we've been in, you get overwhelmed, I think, with the idea of all this and expensive stuff, and it's like white and gray and just kind of boring and stale. And the idea with this was to get the opposite. We want you to walk in here. If you've spilt a beer or coffee on the rug, no one cares. Everything's a rug. It's all carpeted. It's like with this, it sounds like a record going in now, which I'm not used to. Yeah. It's something like, it was a dream of mine, and him to extend that invite to me, man, it's like, it's just really just emphasized that passion even more, you know, really made me want to dig deeper and just like, let's fucking do this.
And you guys have the history together.
Yeah, and him and me worked on, we've done like 5-6 records together. Two being his own, and then 3 or 4 being completely separate projects that some have been released, some haven't. And we've recently started like scoring for film, which is incredible. Yeah. That was like something that blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah, what's that like? Is that something new for you?
Well, it's a whole different approach, but I've always loved instrumentals. I always loved that. If you could take away the vocals and have something just as powerful, he's good at that. My man, I'll put him on a pedestal. He can play a note on the guitar, and it's like he's singing it, you know? So it's one of those rarities. So to be able to work with him hands-on quite a bit is something pretty incredible, you know? Yeah, yeah. And he also, again, he met me when I was just starting, just getting my bearings. I was still running out to get the Cokes and Siggies for people. So to have that progress and to be in this studio now to where we're creating music together now, it's kind of amazing. Yeah. Trick my buddy taught me. I used to spin the mic around. I used to spin the mic, and he's like, no, dum-dum, spin the pole. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. You know, especially when it's like, you know, $5,000, $10,000 microphone. You don't want that shit to fall.
Yeah. Tell me about the acoustics and why that's so important.
You start off always thinking that you need this new vocal mic or compressor, right? That's going to be, that's the saving grace for a shitty recording. You need proper acoustics and proper speakers, monitors, right? You can't know what you're hearing without those two. And it's a guessing game, and I did that for years. I would guess and guess. I would buy this speaker. And I recently, about 2-3 years ago, I switched to these Amphians 215s with their Amp 700. I hated them at first because it showed me all the bad shit in my recordings. Like, come on, Erick. You know, I would go back and listen to old mixes and go, God, maybe I could have done it better, you know? And that's what you need, is honesty in the studio. You don't want anything that you're listening back to be changed, altered. You want it to sound exactly like that microphone does. And I think the worst feeling is get in a mix, having it great in the room, then go into your car, which every one of us has done as an engineer mixer at some point, and go, God damn, this is bad. You do it. That's part of growing in this industry. And I think once you get a good set of speakers and your room's treated right, even if it's not, just knowing your room too. But again, that's such an important aspect that I waited. Like most guys do, I waited. But after that, I started going into like, okay, well, you need a 47. You need expensive 2 mics, ribbon mics. Now, those ribbon mics need some good preamps because they kind of just sound boring on these. So, you know, I have undertone audio preamps, vintage ADM preamps, just kind of a slew of different sonic characters. Some guys are really into just having the board, that's the sound, and I like that. I think ideally if I had like a vintage Neve or an API, yeah. But sometimes it's good to have different kind of characters on different things too. And I mean, sometimes it's like you look at the Gates behind me. I have Gates Level Devils and Tube Techs, L1Bs, 2 different animals, but they're both 2, but yet they're so different. And it's not just that, you know, because it's like a $5,000 price tag for one, it's not going to make it better. It's actually knowing what that does to actually put it on the right track, you know, because if you end up putting it on the track and it's like, this doesn't sound good, just because it's expensive doesn't mean it's going to make it sound good. That's a huge point that I learned later on too. Price tag means nothing. It's like an analog delay that they change the chip on it eventually to make it sound different, but this is the one that sounds rad. It's fucked up half the time, but it does sound good. Custom, I think this is like a fuzz distortion pedal that my buddy Will Nicewander built. Picks up this whole crazy sound on the drums that like, individual mics don't do. It's like this one organic thing breathing. One mic. This guy?
Yeah.
Dude, it weighs like 20 pounds too. This fuzz is incredible. You have different, you can do different resistance on it, 2 different ohms. You can fucking spank the shit out of it and make it not crazy at all. This in my sound. Yeah.
So what about this board here? I noticed this wasn't in the last studio.
Yeah, this is a Tangent. It's like a 1970s, it's your American-made Trident, you know, from what I'm told. My the other studio owner, Robert, really wanted this because he always says you can't just have a studio with, you know, nice little front. You have to have something to put your feet up on. That's his whole thing. So if you can put your feet up here, that's the point of it. No, but really, it's a good sounding console. We're still wiring it all up for this new space, but it's, you know, it's a great sounding, open, round, full console that you can just kind of punch hard. Here's the thing, right? There's going to be the age-old debate of digital versus analog. To me, it's not better or worse. It's different, and it's a tool that I prefer. There's a lot of stuff digitally that I love though too, right? The stuff digitally I can carve out shitty frequencies in the box that stuff would never do. But we're also having to do that because stuff's being recorded differently nowadays. So you're having all this kind of crazy frequencies that weren't there before. But yeah, we got a collection of gear, man, that's tape machine and tubes. It's kind of our thing. But it's all about character in records and how do I emphasize and make that performance better. You know, and not to say that vocal needs something different, but how do you then change it to where it speaks to you differently? And it's crazy, but electronics do that. It adds a sort of texture and grit and emotion sometimes, and people think that's crazy, but there's, you know, something about an actual organ and air moving around the microphones that make it feel something more than if it was just something sterile in the box that wasn't ever there. It's fake. Yeah. Pushing air down with a speaker to this, which rumbles, and then all your highs are up there, right? You power it up because it's like powering up a car, right? Because it's all tubes.
I hear it.
And then when you do this, I think owning it's part of it. I think understanding it's the other part. And that's what makes you appreciate it more. And you understand how it works and why it does what it does. And you start to like get a relationship. Like some of them are named. Like we have numbers on all of them, but like some of them we have multiples. And like this one's named Rochelle. This one's Bunny. Because Rochelle and Bunny sound different even though they're the same. And like, ooh, Rochelle kind of does this and Bunny does this. Sounds crazy, but yeah. Like even today, you know, you're asking me, oh, that guitar tone. I'm like, yeah, but the way he plays it, man, I've had 20, 30 different people use that same pedal. It sounded nothing alike. I forget who it was talking about like the tape machine and equipment. And he talks about the energy of actually what the tape does while recording to it. And it's actually taking and receiving the energy because of the magnetic formula on the old stuff, it's magnetic. So you're actually taking the vibrations and what's happening in the room is still attracting to that. I'm like, yo, I knew there was something good about it, you know? And, you know, I'm still on the, like, smash it to tape thing. Not for everything, but I still kind of like, yeah, let's hit it to tape. It sounds better.
That's what you got right behind you, right? It's your tape machine?
Yeah. It's an Ampex 440B. It's a 2-track, 1/4 inch. It's primarily meant to mix down to. So you take, you know, everything, 80, 100 tracks, whatever it is, 20 if you're lucky. You smash it down to stereo, right, which is 2 tracks. And then from that mix, you hit it to the tape machine. So it kind of gives you a fake I track to tape sound without it being tracked to tape. And it just, I don't know, it just hugs it in a way that most guys who've ever used tape go, yeah. It's like you asked earlier, like, do people come to me for like a sound and a stamp? A lot of that is catered to, I think, my beliefs and how music should be recorded with that in mind of how do we make it not stale, you know? I've heard so many different comments on mixes, and one guy once said it's stale. I'm like, ooh, and that hurt. This was years ago. I was like, oh, damn, that hurt. But it's like my stamp on music is like not to be stale. Like everything to be like, if you play that note, you play that note like you're gonna fucking die, you know? Like that's the last note you'll ever play. That's how it needs to sound. Because on a record, There is no, let me redo that. It's like, it's out. That's your sound now. And so it's like, how do you capture that in the most energetic way of conveying emotion? Maybe just one note, maybe it needs 20 notes. I don't know. But there's just, I mean, that's just capturing that moment, as I think really is my strong suit, I would say.
But it's cool for an artist who has a bunch of ideas, you know, someone
Sure.
who comes to you and I want to do this, I want to do that, like,
Yeah.
for you to kind of like wrangle them in,
Yeah.
give them sort of a direction.
You're a professional wrangler. It's like, you have to understand is that it could be a solo artist or a band, and each time they come in, they come on a different boat. It might be a fucking raft, or it might be a floaty, or it might be this big yacht, right? Each one has their own way of doing things. The guy in the floaty is just kicking it, and he's just like, this is what I do, you know? And he usually takes a lot more directions, and he's just open, yeah, fuck it. The guy on the yacht has a whole team of like, this is how it's gonna sound. This is what you're gonna do, and you more get told how to do the record, which I take no difference to. But I do enjoy the guy in the floaty, kind of the makeshift raft, because I think that there's a more honest ending and sound, because it's organic. It's created there. It's created on the spot. We don't have that luxury nowadays for a lot of guys, because they can't just sit in the studio for a month. A lot of us have jobs, and a lot of guys are doing just various things to get by. So the goal is to get that guy in a raft kind of thing, but with that yacht mentality sometimes of this product, you know? There's so many little things that are, I mean, I think it's more than just the person that inspires me. It's like the whole aspect of it is inspiring, of like the type of beater they use, the head. That stuff intrigues me more than actually the guy doing it, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know, my opinion changes every day. Anyone that says they know what the hell they're doing is wrong, right? We're all figuring this shit out every day. And just, I guess, every record you do is just a kind of a timestamp on where you were in that part of life. You know, there's stuff I did years ago, I'm like, you know, that's kind of all right. I do shit now, I'm like, all right. Still kind of the same question mark. It's just kind of, does a client love it? You know, there's almost no records I do that I love. You know, we all kind of look at it. It's like looking at it in the mirror naked after you've done a record. You're kind of like, you know, sometimes you like it, sometimes you don't. I don't know. But it's that kind of that constant need for more, and the pursuit of something perfect, and whatever, you know, definition that is to either of us. I think we all have our own idea, but to capture that sonically, I think is the end goal for me, really, you know? To capture whatever's in the artist's head. Just put it in, it's like fucking 2 channels. Here you go.